Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Secrets for an Inspirational Life. How are you all today? I hope that you are well. I hope that, as always, there's a little bit of beauty that's touching your lives and that there's a lot of hope that's alighting upon your soul. And in these times that we live in today, that somehow we've been placed all together on this planet for some wild and wonderful reason. And sometimes we forget, as always, what our reason is. But it's important, I feel, to have that focus in life, to have that discipline in life, to actually know why we are here. What's the reason that we're here on this planet? Because each and every one of us has a special role to play. And if we can help each other along the way, I think we've pretty much nailed it at life. Now, I'm really very delighted to welcome my guest today, who is the very multi-talented Matt Stait. Matt is a well-known figure in the personal and private security and also self-defense world, as well as being a leading author and a leading authority in this industry, having published several books. He is a multiple black belt, world champion gold medalist, and he has taught in all the main shows in the UK. His life really reads like a book, a fascinating book at that. Matt was the victim of abuse and bullying and dropped out of school at an early age. He lost his father to suicide and was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a teenager through his exposure to violence. But that didn't stop him. Above all, he has still managed to reach absolutely incredible, superb highs and gone on to achieve many notable successes, such as being the world champion martial artist, a bodyguard, a best-selling author, and a TikTok specialist. And that's just to name a few things. Today, he shares his incredibly brave and inspiring journey. Welcome, dear Matt.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And yourself?
Yes, I'm fine. We spoke about this earlier, Matt and I. am feeling a bit cold at this time of year, I have to say, but wrapped up in woolen socks and woolen jumpers and woolen hats and all sorts of things.
Yes, and as I mentioned, I'm sort of just come back from walking the dogs and have my sort of dog walking attire on halfway up, and the rest of me is professional and presentable.
Oh, very good, very good. What sort of dog do you have, Matt?
I have an American bulldog, and
Oh,
he's a fantastic animal. He's big, he's bouncy, he's very slobbery, he's huge amounts of fun, and he needs a lot of exercise and care and looking after. So he keeps me outside a lot more than I would otherwise be, which is great and fantastic. And yeah, he's a fab companion. Probably like myself in many ways, a little bit misunderstood and can come across as intimidating to some, but actually he's very lovable.
yes. I've heard a lot about them. A friend of mine, he's also actually he's a martial artist. He's an MMA mixed martial arts. He
Mm.
practices in that, and he has a dog like yours. And he said it scares all the neighbours and visitors, but it looks after him very well. So I wouldn't mind, but I'm actually a little afraid of dogs. Little dogs are fine, but big dogs, I'm a little bit sort of cautious of.
Yeah, well, that's sort of understandable because of what they could be capable of. But for the
Yes.
most part, they're good as gold. I mean, again, like with a lot of other things, it's to do with how they're brought up, how they interact with the world, and I've spent a lot of time, energy, money, resources on making sure that my dog is sociable and well behaved. That's my responsibility as a dog owner, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful to hear, actually. Now, you have an absolutely incredible life story. And I, I'm absolutely, I'm so impressed by it all, the things that you've gone through and the things that you now do. It's a success story. Let's go back a bit. How did it all begin? Tell us a little bit about your early life and how this incredibly interesting life unfolded.
Well, from early life, I mean, I'll sort of briefly go over it rather than sort of dwell on all kinds of stuff there. But essentially, we were what they class as very working class. There wasn't really a great deal of money. My father was a very, very heavy drinker. There was a lot of arguments and aggression in the home right the way through my sort of childhood. My mother and father split up. We moved repeatedly, so I was always the new kid in a new school, having to face all of those challenges. And yeah, it was, sort of a difficult upbringing. I mean, not in the sense that it's the worst it could have been, because clearly there's far worse in the world, but it was very challenging, and it sort of it did leave lots of things that had to be overcome as I got older.
Yeah. Things like anything really, I suppose, in childhood is an imprint for the rest of our lives. However much we try to get over some things are actually meant to be in some way in order to shape us as human beings.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, things like social interaction and how to do that correctly, have a relationship. I mean, that was something I've struggled with for a very long time, because of course I'd never seen it done properly. and also coming from that kind of background with that sort of inbuilt toxicity, for want of a better word, that's what I was projecting out to the world and drawing towards me. So I was literally communicating with a lot of broken and damaged people that were, making my problems worse. And so that was, that's been an ongoing challenge right the way through, and I'm still not there yet, of course.
It's a lifelong challenge, I think, for the things that we go through in life. Some of the things that are the most difficult try to prepare us for some of the best things in our life. But sometimes, we all can become afraid of letting the good in if we've been hurt to a certain extent.
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, those barriers that we all put up, and that sort of feeling of, well, if I don't allow somebody to hurt me, I won't get hurt, or if I hurt them first, and those kind of damaging kind of thought processes. Yeah, we all go through those, and that's something that, again, I've had to sort of look at over time quite a lot, because there's been many occasions in my life where I've screwed up, where it might have gone differently if I'd have been a little more open.
Yeah, I think we all know those moments in life. And sometimes, the wall that we're sort of trying to build around us is actually keeping us from living a life. It's keeping us a prisoner in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's lots of different types of fear, and it metamorphosizes in so many different ways. But essentially, yes, that fear is what sort of keeps us from achieving what we can achieve, isn't it? And how it manifests in so many different ways, can be through relationships or work or challenges or anything. Yeah.
It's true. And it's so sort of in depth, because some of the things, the most ludicrous things, I mean, like the smallest things, we don't even realize that we don't want to do certain things in our life, actually come down to fear. Because if we had this brave heart consistently, we would achieve so many things. But I think there are moments when we can become paralyzed by fear, and then we can't do anything. And then we're sort of no good to ourselves. We're no good to anyone else. But that journey that you have actually gone through must have been a very brave journey to get to where you are now.
I don't sort of class it as such, but I put it down to some of the choices that were made. So as an example of that, when my father committed suicide, I had sort of decisions to make as to what my life was going to be. And it was a genuine crossroads. And so I immersed myself very heavily into martial arts, which is obviously, has worked out over the years. but that was hugely influential when it came to facing fears, working against your fears, learning how to fail without actually failing, as in, just getting used to having to work at something over and over again until it finally went right, until it finally stuck. So it taught me a massive amount of usable life skills.
Now, I know that you were a victim of bullying, and that is a huge thing in life, because I had the same in my lower school, where I was bullied, and I've spoken about it before, and sort of for a year was kicked in the head and didn't tell anybody by a gang. And I was only very young, about 8 or 9 years old, and I didn't speak about it. And then that actually made me take up judo. Right. When I was 10, because I thought, I've had enough of this. I can't live like this. Even though I was young, I understood that this wasn't correct. But how did you get into the martial arts? How did you cross that bridge from having this distressing time to actually wanting to cross the bridge to a better life? Because a lot of people can't make that move because it's far too fearful, and they haven't got the resources to do that. How did you do that? How did you go from your father's suicide to the abuse, from the bullying, to cross this huge, vast ocean, in fact, to pull yourself back together?
Well, there's an awful lot of time and things going on throughout all of that. So that wasn't a process that happened in a week or a month or even a year. So when we talk about my own position, there was bullying for years, because, as I said, we was always the new kid in school. We were always the ones that didn't have any money. We were always a single parent. And so there was, that was sort of, that carried on for quite some time. And then, of course, it was in the home as well. So there was actually no real escape from it at that time. And so I have written about this in some of the books that I've done. And I talk about, at that time, I wanted a way out. And so I would spend quite a bit of time alone, but essentially hiding from everyone. Right? And I would be thinking about these things. And at the time, as a child, I used to really like Spider-Man. But I understood even then that the chances of getting bit by a radioactive spider and gathering superpowers is pretty slim. Right? And the other sort of hero that I liked at the time was Tarzan, and the same deal. A gang of marauding gorillas weren't going to come through and adopt me on the council estate where I grew up. So what I was left with was, back in the day, you had television shows like Kung Fu, and there was some martial arts type people in the wrestling. And I looked at that and I thought, actually, that is something that is achievable. It's real. And if I get good at it, I won't be afraid anymore. And that was my sort of childhood way of thinking. Now, obviously, that's not true, but that's what I thought about it. And then there were several false starts. I mean, as you mentioned, the financial element of it, we had no money. I couldn't pay for any classes. Not that there were really that many classes about at the time. So there was a number of false starts where I did have a little try at one or two things that didn't work out that well for me. But then when my father took his own life, I literally went AWOL for a couple of weeks, drunk way more alcohol than is good for a human being. Just went into this complete downward spiral for a while, and finally sort of got out of that a little bit. But all my peer group at the time, the vast majority of them are dead through drugs or in prison. So it was a real choice and a crossroads at that point as to what I did. And I do believe that there's sort of addictive personalities. And so if you see an alcoholic, they're no different to a really, really fit person who does all the ultra marathons or the running or things like that. They both got that same personality trait. They're just exhibiting it differently. And I think I have that trait. I think it's inherent in my genes, what have you, that sort of addictive personality. So I turned it to martial arts, and that's where I really sort of got into it. And obviously, it gave me a peer group, a father figure, a sense of right or wrong, a community. It filled so many areas of my life that up till then had been left vacant. So yeah, that was really where I started to take that seriously, and it did become the sort of main focus of my life for many, many years. That was it. Everything else came secondary.
And what age were you, Matt, when you started with the martial arts?
Well, that was well, I'd started when I was a young guy. So I'd had a couple of guys, like I said, that sort of didn't really work out when I was sort of, sort of 8, 10, 12, that sort of time. But then it was my late teens, so sort of 18, 19, when my father died, that I actually then started to pursue it as a lifestyle, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of life. I always think that martial arts is a way of life. And what actual martial arts do you do? What do you do? Kung Fu or what is it that you do?
I do all sorts now. I run a full-time martial arts gym now, amongst other things. But back then I started in, well, the one that stuck was traditional karate. Because again, back in those days, it wasn't like it is now. There was no internet. You couldn't YouTube anything. And there wasn't a martial arts gym on every street corner in every town as there is now. Finding a black belt was like very, very rare back in those days. And so you sort of took what was on offer. But I was incredibly fortunate to come across a karate school where the people there, the instructors there, they were very, very good. And I credit them with absolutely everything that's gone forward in my life. Is as simple as that. They absolutely turned me around from what could have been.
And you're a multiple black belt, is that right?
Yes.
And a world champion, and you own your own school.
Yes, that's right. Yes. What was my passion has become my job. It still remains my passion. So, but I'm now fortunate enough to be able to do that. So, yeah, the karate went into the kickboxing, which went into Krav Maga and some MMA and judo and Japanese jiu-jitsu. And I just, once you start learning something, I'm sure everyone's the same. Once you start learning something and you're really absorbed in it, every time you find an answer, it just leaves another question. And so I spent many, many years just sourcing that, traveling the world, going around places, learning things, and that's not gone away. The passion is still there. So yeah, I've ended up with 30, I think it's 13 different instructor licenses in various martial arts, a number of black belts, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and I ended up teaching security for many, many years as well, doing all the conflict management, control and restraint, communication kind of stuff, and so yeah, that was my entire life for a long time.
Incredible. Tell us a little bit about this personal and private security work, because have you written a book about this?
Yeah. So there's a book.
What's it called?
Yeah, my first book, which is this one, which is called Modern Samurai: A Revealing Look at the Private Security Industry, which was basically just sort of memoirs of my time working in security, so running nightclubs and bars and events and bodyguarding people, and just a lot of stories from that. Now, I didn't want to write one of those hard man books, let's call it that, where it's just a succession of how somebody got beaten up. So it's not that.
Okay.
And the reviews and the way that it came back was actually really, really positive. It hit number one in its category twice on Amazon. It's gained a lot of positive reviews within the industry as well. And so I was sort of pleased with that, because I honestly thought, as I was writing it, I honestly thought, what the heck was I doing? Nobody was going to listen to me. What do I know? And it sat in a cupboard for about 3 years. I half wrote it, put it in a cupboard, and told myself that I couldn't do it. And what was I thinking of?
Well, and here we are today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I sort of finally took it back out, dusted it off, and forced myself to write the thing, and gave myself a structure of how I was going to sort of do that, and then did it. And that's been the way that I sort of work with my writing from now on in. And I now write. I've written a number of books, but I also now write for various magazines and publications and things. And
what sort of things do you write?
Well, mostly around the things that I sort of know about and work with. So marketing, social media, martial arts, self-defense, communication, overcoming fear, all of those kind of things that, the sort of skill sets and things that I can actually offer an opinion on. I don't tend to write about things I don't know about or I'm not passionate about. I'm of an age now where if I'm not excited by it, I don't tend to do it.
Yeah. That's good advice, actually, at any age, I think. I think that's good advice at any age. But my goodness. Now, personal and private security work, is that something that you were drawn to because of the life that you had led and that you felt that it was something that you would excel in? What made you go into that area of work?
Well, it turns out that I was good at it with regards to martial arts and things. So I'm not a small chap. I'm quite a big fellow, and that obviously meant that physically I had advantage, but I was also physically capable. I picked up the movement really quickly. I understood it, and I found it. I found that I was okay with that. So, and what was interesting was all of the things that had sort of gone on before, although negative and although not good and although could be seen as something that was detrimental in my life, actually worked in my favor in that regard, because I wasn't frightened of confrontation. I'd lived through it for donkey's years. That was sort of normal bread and butter. So what these guys was doing was actually pleasant. And then on top of that, I understood a lot of the psychology of it and the way that it worked, because obviously I lived through that for a long time. And then on top of that, I'm young, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm, like I said, a reasonably big chap. So I had advantages there, which is something that not everybody gets. That's something that I'm always grateful for, is the fact that I had the physicality to be able to actually make these things happen. So regardless of anything else, I was given the gift of, health and wellness. And so I was able to do this. And so essentially I was winning competitions, doing well, and the offer came up: would I like to work on a door? Would I like to go and be a bouncer, a doorman? And I would be paid cash, and I would be picked up and dropped off, and it would all be taken care of. I just literally have to go there. And so of course I said yes. I said, why not? I'm a young man. I had all these visions of being surrounded by scantily clad young ladies who, of course, would all be throwing themselves at me, as you can imagine.
Yes.
And of course, I would also be the hero in the movie. So if there was a bad guy, I would obviously, chuck them out without breaking a sweat, say something witty, wink at a girl, and it would be the Indiana Jones version as opposed to the reality of it. Of course, the reality of it is different, but that's how I spent, the weeks daydreaming before the actual event arose and before I started work. So yeah, and it just took off from there, really. I did a shift, it became another shift, it became another shift, and before I really knew what was going on, I was embedded into that lifestyle and culture.
Yes, and with martial arts, I know that, I was 10, and because I was bullied, somehow it gave me the confidence, Matt, where I had a secret. And that secret was my secret, in that I had the confidence then to deal with whoever sort of came up to me or tried to bully me. Although judo is a sport, it's not really a self-defense, as we know, but it still gave me that discipline in life and that sort of secret confidence that I can do something, which is really important, I think, that you feel that you can be good at something, and that no matter what your surroundings are, there is that sort of hope, I suppose, for a better life.
Yeah. Well, that's where that confidence comes from, isn't it? When people say, what would you give as advice to people who are going through that at the moment, that are being bullied? That whole, hit them back and all that kind of thing is pretty redundant, really. It's not that helpful. My actual advice would be similar to what you've just said, which is whatever it is that you're passionate about and you enjoy, get very good at it. The confidence comes from that. And then surround yourself with people who appreciate that. And then you find your gang, you find your crowd, you find your tribe, and you also build that confidence because you're achieving things. And then that bleeds out into everything else. So
yeah.
And I've got a story that I relate that really sort of highlights this, and it was a real turning point in how I saw my personal situation. Long story short, I was I'd been training in martial arts for many years. I'd been working on doors for many years. I'd changed as a person from when I was, 12 or 13 at school. And I pulled into this small town car park at the same time as this other chap. And this other chap got out of the car and I recognized him immediately. And he recognized me. It was actually one of my worst childhood bullies. Now, age hadn't been that kind to him. Time hadn't been that great. He hadn't really grown, as in he hadn't got that much taller. He was losing his hair. He was out of shape. He was overweight. He was quite scruffy looking. And our eyes met. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to batter him. I'm going to physically beat him up now. And I pardon the way I'm saying it if it offends somebody.
No, it's fine.
But this is the emotions that I had running through me. He'd literally terrorized me for such a long time and made me feel so worthless that I thought, this is it. This is the time where I get all that back. I've done all of this stuff now. I'm more than capable. I could absolutely, damage him beyond all recognition. And I wanted to for that moment, So we didn't say a word, but I knew that he knew who I was and vice versa. And
he recognized you.
Yeah, you could see it in his eyes, yeah. But between the high street of the town itself and the car park was this alleyway, and it had really really tall houses either side of it, and it's quite narrow. And so I walked behind him into this alleyway, and I went right up behind him. And I mean, I was that close, he could feel the breath of, my breath on the back of his neck. And I did it on purpose. And you could see him sort of shrinking up in that. And in that moment, like I said, I wanted to absolutely physically hurt him. That was my sole intention. But for some reason, I had this weird sensation that I didn't need to, I didn't have to. And I actually felt pity for him because I could see him in front of me and he was terrified. You could see that he was terrified. He'd obviously been aware of what I've been doing over time. And obviously, as I mentioned, I'm a big chap. I changed physically quite dramatically.
How tall are you?
Well, I'm 6'2" and about 18 stone.
Okay, so that's big.
Yeah, that's a fair size. Yeah. And obviously with all the training and everything else, I'm sort of, I'm capable with it. So I'm not sort of, so reasonably athletic with it. Let's call it that. So anyway, we're in this situation, and my brain just said to me, you don't have to do this. You don't need to do this. You've already done it. You've beaten him mentally, which is what he did to you all those years ago. And you don't have to take a physical action. And that was a really strange sensation for me. And it really sort of changed my way of looking at the world, because from that moment on, it was exactly that. It was like, well, I'm not that kid anymore. I'm not that child who was frightened.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I recognized that in myself.
That's actually quite remarkable, that you had that strength of character to do that. And funny you should say that, because as you were talking about that, Matt, I was remembering that I went into a supermarket about 3 years ago, and I saw the girl, one of the gang of the girl who had bullied me. I recognized her. She didn't recognize me. And I remember looking at her and I thought, oh my goodness, it's her. And I had been living abroad for a long time, so I hadn't seen her, and I hadn't seen her since I was 10 and all of this. And I thought, shall I say something to her? Because she was really horrible and beat me every day with the gang. And I thought, what shall I say? I mean, what do you say to somebody? And then all of a sudden, it was similar to yourself. I looked at her and I thought, there's nothing to say. It's gone. And in fact, albeit a difficult thing to, I suppose, do, like with yourself that you'd gone through, it is enough to just walk away and realize how far you've actually come. But that's not such an easy thing to do, because I always think when you said about Kung Fu, you mean grasshopper.
Yes,
and yes, I love that series. So, and I remember that the master in the program, for people out there, it was a series and it was a master, and it was David Carradine, wasn't it? He was the monk, and it ran for a long time. I think I was watching it sort of when I was really young, and then I kept watching it again and again because I like the wisdom. And I never forget, this is what actually stopped me from also saying something to her. And it was to the words, maybe you'll remember it. But Master, if someone attacks us, should we attack them back? And the Master says something like, but then we haven't learned anything because then we become like them.
Mm.
And that I always think about that. And it's a very fine line, isn't it, Matt? Where you've got to know where to defend yourself, but also you've got to know that some fights are just not worth it.
Yeah. Oh, very much. Yeah. I mean, there's a similar thing I was told many, many years ago, which sort of stuck with me. And it was a very simple phrase, and it went like this: just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Ah, wow. Yes. Very true. Very true. And I suppose that's the wisdom that you learn through life. And as you get older, is where is that line? Because we're all standing on that fine line of right and wrong. And can we live with ourselves if we do this, or can't we live with ourselves if we don't do it? And it's that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, very much, very much. And that's really where, again, where all the training and everything sort of came into play with that, because the aim is that you sort of become as good as you're capable of becoming physically, which is really, I think, the responsibility of everybody before, before we shuffle off this mortal coil, as they say. I think it's our responsibility to become the absolute best that we can possibly be with the tools that we've been given. So for me, that was through the medium of martial arts, and to see how far I could take myself physically. But it also transpires that affects you mentally, emotionally, and every other way. And so, you were building mental muscles all the time as well. You were building things, not just confidence, but control, self-control, self-discipline, and hopefully learning to manage your ego, but also understanding the world around you. I mean, when I first started martial arts, and again, this is something I talk about because it's a very important factor in what's sort of gone on since. When I first started martial arts, I was a young, disadvantaged white kid in a white area that had working class people all around me, heavy drinkers, heavy fighters, and that was the only world that I knew and I'd ever seen. And then when I started martial arts, I was confronted with all kinds of people from all different kinds of walks of life, different religions, different socioeconomic statuses, different backgrounds, different cultures. And it was just a huge eye-opener that there were all these different ways of living that I had not understood before. But also the fact that, again, when you did your judo, I'm sure you're aware of this, but also the fact that, when you put that gi on, when you put that outfit on for the first time and you get onto those mats, you are judged by what you do and your actions from that point on. You're not Mark the accountant, you're not Doris the housewife with 3 kids. You're a student, and you will be judged on your merits that you perform on those mats. And that was such an influence, because, as I said, up until then, I knew there were other worlds out there, but I didn't think for 1 minute that I could ever be any part of those. And as with everything, if we don't understand it, we tend to look at it with fear and suspicion. So that's how I approached the world until that point.
That's interesting, because when people talk about martial artists and people that have not been involved in martial arts, some people are very afraid when they hear that you are an expert, such as yourself, in your field. How does that work with relationships? Friendships or love or whatever. How on earth do people sort of react when you come across and you're this sort of martial artists, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be scared.
Yeah, it can be something of a poisoned chalice in some ways. It's a huge blessing. It genuinely is. But But if you're talking about sort of socially and things, so there has been occasions, and I have actually spoken to people afterwards to one side quietly and just sort of explained this. But there has been occasions where I've been introduced to somebody and they've said along the lines of, "Oh, this is Matt. He teaches martial arts. Watch out because he might beat you up."
Yeah,
And
I've heard that so many times.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
but for me, it's a bit like somebody going around and saying, "Oh, this is Frank. He's an accountant. You know, be a bit careful because he might do your taxes." Um, it's sort of a very strange way of looking at the world in that respect. But I would also say, and I've got to be careful I say this, but there's also an element of it's sort of self-inflicted sometimes, because martial arts overall does tend to present sometimes a face of itself that that kind of highlights that, and maybe that's not necessarily what it should be doing. So for me, the ability to be able to defend myself and my loved ones if it was required was a fantastic skill as a young man living in what was a very, very difficult and deprived council estate area where stabbings, muggings and beatings and crime was through the roof. It made absolute sense at that point in my life to gather those skills. Now I'm a middle-aged man living in a really nice village where everybody's reasonably okay. There's very low crime, and so those skills are redundant. But the skills of self-control and discipline and fitness and health and being able to communicate with people and all of those great things that come with it, those are the important skills. Those are the life skills. Those are the things that take you through. And so whether that's learning to be able to work within a community and a hierarchy and an organization, and whether that's learning how to do things that you may not necessarily find comfortable or want to do. The amount of times where I did not want to get off my comfy sofa and go training, they're endless. However, I did those things, and it was those little victories, it was those little things that you sort of enforce yourself to do that lead to the bigger things.
Yes, and I wonder, is it, for example, people that have trained in the military, for example, and they have to be, depending on, which area they're in, and some that are sort of in close protection work or whatever, and they have to be specifically trained and they have to be on high alert all the time. And you, having been brought up in that environment and then also being able to practice these things within the martial arts world, how do you then go from that to being, for example, the gentle giant, so to speak, and to be someone who can still be caring and loving? Because people often associate bodyguards, close protection work, police, whatever, army, anything like that, that the people that are involved in that sort of industry don't have that softer side.
You'll find that most of them do. They just don't necessarily show it. You develop, working within those kind of fields, you develop what is known as I'll say it politely, a F-off face.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you develop this persona of being completely unfeeling and unsympathetic and all of those things, because if you don't do that, then people will try and take advantage. I mean, that's unfortunately sort of the way that it is, because bear in mind, in those kind of roles, your job is to deal with the 1%, not the 99% who are behaving absolutely perfectly. You're there to deal with that 1% that would want to ruin it for everybody else. And unfortunately, that 1% aren't the type of people that would politely take no for an answer. So that has to be enforced somehow. And whether that's through force of will, whether that's through physical force, whether that's through law and legislation, however that's maintained, it still has to be maintained. And this is a fundamental that is difficult for some people to grasp, but it is a reality of the world we live in. And that unfortunately is that sometimes, sometimes there is a requirement for force of some description to be brought to bear. And so if you look at, whatever level you look at, there is that in practice. So the government, as an example, they will go to war. That's the worst, the highest level of violence that there is available to us. But if somebody doesn't pay their taxes, well, what are they being threatened with? They're being threatened with violence. You will get taken to court, you will get fined, you will get taken to prison, you will have your liberty taken away from you. So there's all these different things to enforce things. And so it's just a case of at what level you're at. Now, I'm not suggesting that people should resort to violence, because that's not what I'm saying at all. But unfortunately, that very small percentage of people, the threat of it at least, is the only thing that they will respond to, if you like. And it's a hard one. It's a hard one, like I said, because there are a lot of people that have never been in any of these environments, and so don't have to consider that in their world, or they have the luxury of never being in those kind of positions. Right? And great, I totally appreciate and understand that. But when you're in a position where the only thing that is going to stop serious violence is greater violence, then that's a different way of seeing the world. And of course, if you're living in that environment, and this is really fundamentally what I'm trying to say with this, I spent a very long time in those environments where violence was a very real thing. It wasn't imagined, it wasn't on the television, it was there, it was in your face, it was real, and it could happen, and it could change your life or even take your life. And so when you're living in that day to day, and the psychology of that daily, you end up with this really peculiar mindset. And it's only when I stopped doing it that it sort of became obvious, because I was talking to people and I was what they call lining them up. So I was picturing in my head how I was going to control them physically, how I was going to knock them out, or how I was going to physically hold them and manhandle them, just in case they got violent or kicked off. And that decompression stage, when I stopped doing that kind of work, that wasn't an overnight process. Again, that took a little bit of time, And so, if you've lived in a world where car bombs are very, very regular, right? So if you live in a world where snipers are hanging out of windows and cars are getting blown up, if you're living in that kind of environment, then it's right that you check those windows when you walk out the door. It's right that you check under your car, because those are genuine threats. If you live in a world where none of those things are part of your life, then you may look at that, if somebody did it in your environment, and think, my goodness, that's over the top, that's unnecessary, that's paranoid. And so it is all relevant as to the experiences and where you are in the world. So, I'm not sure what I was trying to get at with that, but it's...
No, I understand what you're saying. Every situation is different, and it calls for a different set of, I suppose, rules. Because if you are in danger, you have to protect your life. I totally understand what you're saying. But also, are you still in that sort of high alert mode most of the time? You're not.
No, that's why I used the word decompression, because it was, I did have to literally decompress from that. And I've had to work at that, to be honest, and catch myself with that and say, actually, that's an unreasonable reaction to the situation. And so I've had to go through that kind of conversation with myself a lot. I've had to sort of manage that within myself a lot, because again, if you think of being a small kid, and at that point in your life, violence was kind of the answer to everything. If you hadn't done something, you got beaten. If you had done something and it wasn't right, you got beaten. Anger was constant. And so that was sort of a language that you understand. And of course, you've got to, like with everything, as I said earlier on, if you take something away, it's got to be replaced with something else. And so if that's been stripped out as a reaction, as a way of living, as a way of being, as a way of communicating, then that's got to be replaced with something. And I'm very fortunate to have some great people around me who even to this day, if I'm sort of succumbing to that, they will sort of draw me to one side and say, Matt, you're being silly, stop it, and I don't think that will ever change, really. I mean, there's always be that element within me, but that's why the martial arts comes in, because that's my outlet, that's where it goes, that's where I send it where it can be positive in the world.
Yes, I suppose it's about channeling that energy, whatever energy you have, into something that may be destructive to yourself or to others. I think that we have that, all of us have that potential to channel it into something and release it into something good, good for our life, good for other people's life, which is what you've done with your school. Now, tell us a little bit about your school and where you are now.
Well, the school itself, that's a physical space where obviously with some of the current situations that have been going on the past few years has been somewhat challenging, as we haven't been able to open for long stretches, and when we haven't been able to do what we would normally do. So a lot of that has been somewhat complicated, but as a rule, we're a full-time place that takes kids from the age of 4 and right through, and we've got students in their sort of early 70s, and so it crosses the whole gambit. We've got people that come for fun, we've got people that come because they want to compete, we've got people that are with us because they work professionally in roles that involve confrontation and everything in between. It's a fabulous place. I call it my giant man cave, because I get to have all my toys there and my favorite people, and we have a lot of fun with it. We've been at that place now for over 10 years, that particular place.
And where is that, if I may ask?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, we're just on the border of South Wales. If anyone's aware of that and they know where the Wye Valley is, which is a beautiful part of the world.
Beautiful, yes.
Yeah, that's where we are. So I was in Bristol for many years, and used to sort of run all my classes and all over there. But then we moved over a number of years ago, and so yeah, we've been here now for a while, and it's a fantastic part of the world.
And what else do you do? Because you do also online courses, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I do a number of different things now. Yeah, so basically, I a few years
I saw lots of things that you do. You do so many things. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I started doing the online courses a number of years ago with regards to the gym and martial arts. So I did various online courses for that people could access and buy. I wrote a number of blogs and say the books and things, and then that sort of grew out. And obviously with the situation, a lot of people were moving online for all kinds of reasons, and so that sort of panned out a little bit more. But then I also do a lot of social media stuff, especially working with TikTok and teaching businesses and people like and individuals how to use the platform.
Oh, right. Okay. So what sort of things would you teach somebody?
Well, essentially what to do with the platform for what they wanted it for. So, I mean, I've just been having some interesting conversations in and around podcasting as an example, seeing as we are on a podcast.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, well, there's a lot of similarities to everything. So if you look at sort of basic branding and that kind of thing, then you've got all of those elements that should be brought to bear. You've got the sort of content types and all that kind of thing, so you know what you're putting in. But it's really about understanding your audience, who it is you want to speak to, and then finding out the best way to actually speak to them. So that sort of determines what your profile will look like, what your content will look like, you know, how often, when, where, all of those things. And then it's obviously the tools of TikTok, because it's different to the other platforms. They all have their own way of doing things. And TikTok is quite different in a number of ways, although all the other platforms now are working really hard to build copycat versions. So things like Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, even Facebook now is doing a short form video platform. So they're all seeing the success of TikTok and how well it's doing and trying to replicate that in their own fields.
And this is something that is that your main job now that you do alongside everything else?
Well, main job's an interesting term, because they're all sort of intermingled, because again, the TikTok stuff started when I was promoting my online courses for the gym, and I started like that.
Oh,
okay. And essentially I built my following, and it grew really quickly, and I found myself with hundreds of thousands of people following me from all over the globe. I had videos that were, 4 or 5 million views in. I was getting like 2+ 2.5 million views a week. And
that's remarkable.
Yeah. For an old guy, it's not bad, is it? So, and then so all
Well
these.
done. I think it's absolutely fantastic, really.
No, thank you, thank you. So these things were happening, and it was like, well, okay, well, can I replicate this? Right, that lightning in the bottle. Can I? What am I doing? Is it just luck? So what I actually did was I got some friends of mine who were also sort of business related and not your typical TikToker. So they weren't 20, they weren't fabulous looking, and you do not want to see them in their underwear, right? So
don't mention any names, Matt.
No, I'm not going to mention any names. So and so what I did is I basically structured out how I did it and what I did, because I've gone far more an educational pathway, and so the content that we give actually has value as teachable things, as information, and education. And so taking that and then building out the structure of how I did it using basic marketing principles and branding principles, and then layering on top again the way that TikTok works itself with regard to the tools and the application, and then putting all that together in a framework. And lo and behold, literally within 2 to 3 weeks, I was having guys hitting 50, 60,000 followers from a standing start. And
you're a very useful gentleman to know.
Yeah, well, that was it. And it was like, well, actually, there's something in this. And so I basically more and more people started contacting me. And then I found, before I knew what was going on, I found myself as, because this is a number of years ago now as well, by the way. Now you can't literally throw your smartphone out the window without hitting a social media guru on the head. A few years ago, TikTok was still very, very new, and brand new coming to the fore. And that's the time frame we're talking about. We're talking 2.5 years ago. Bear in mind, TikTok's still only like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so now there are people that I trained 2 years ago that are now basically doing this for themselves and are promoting themselves as coaches and experts and things, which is absolutely fine and great to see. And so that's been a natural progression, as almost all of these things have. So on the back of that, I thought, well, I've been promoting my businesses and the things that I do through social media for years. I've been helping other people do it, and I've been obviously I left school with nothing, working on building sites, and so everything that you now see has been on the back of my own way of doing things with regards to social media presentation and everything else. And so it was like, okay, well, what do I want to do now? And I thought, well, it would be a really good idea to go to university and get a master's degree in marketing. So I tootled off and did that. And so that
goodness,
that sort of now comes into a lot of it as well with regards to that. So I'm just on the verge now of I'm trying to talk everybody I know into letting me, because I was a little bit cranky towards the end of my masters, with the dissertation and all the work that was on top, because I did it.
But have you completed that now?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I did it full time while running the businesses. So I thought, seeing as we can't leave the house, seeing as we can't do anything.
Congratulations. What an achievement. My goodness.
No, thank you. It was an enjoyable process. So, but now I'm trying to convince everyone to let me do a PhD.
Oh, are you going to do it?
Well, we're let's put it like this. I'm saying yes, but it's not just my decision to make. So obviously there are people around me that have an opinion that I need to consider as well, because it directly affects them. So and everyone's really positive for the most part. It's just because I was such a cranky so-and-so for the last month of the masters.
Oh, how long did it take you to complete, Matt?
Well, like I said, I did it full time over the course of a year. But it was the dissertation itself, the sort of end, the end product after all the hard work we put together. So it was 20,000 words, and that was pretty challenging, because although I've written several books, I've never written anything academically to that point. And so that's a completely different way of doing things, and a completely so you don't just sit there and blurt things out onto a document, whatever comes in your head. You have to research, you have to go backwards and forwards. It's really hard to get any flow. So that was challenging, but really, really enjoyable. And I actually got a distinction on that dissertation. So I scored really highly with it. And
wow.
And I'm presenting that at an academic symposium in a few days for telling the story of business.
Wow, congratulations. What an achievement, really.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Are you proud? Are you proud of yourself?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, because I don't know. There's that's a weird way of looking at it for me. Proud isn't quite the right word. I'm pleased that I've set targets and achieved them. But I'm also very much aware that this isn't a one-man band. There's no way that I could have done these things without the help and support of the people around me. My long-suffering better half, shall we say, is an absolute saint when it comes to putting up with me and my crazy harebrained schemes.
You know what they say? Behind every successful man, there lies
it's blooming true
a
as
lady.
Well. And it genuinely, it's true as well. And that goes back to what we were saying right at the start of the conversation, where we were talking about learning basic social skills and how to have relationships with people and things like that. I would never, this is true, and I don't mind admitting it. Even as far as in recent years, it's been an ongoing process. But 10 years ago, I would never have ever been able to maintain a relationship with somebody like that, because I just wouldn't have been there, and I wouldn't have been in that place, and I wouldn't have been the kind of person that would have been able to behave in a manner to keep that. So it's an ongoing learning process, and I'm far from there yet. But every time that something happens and I can tick off another goal, for want of a better word, then that helps to solidify whatever the next crazy challenge is.
And what was the point? Was it one particular point that you said, I'm going to give this lady, this life, a chance? Or was it a whole list of things, and then one day it was sort of a moment of epiphany and you said, well, that's it now, I'm going to try doing this? What was it that sort of was that pivot point for you?
Well, I do think it sort of came sort of staged over time a little bit. Again, it wasn't, there was sort of pivotal moments, like I said, with regards to my father and things like that. But I think it was more a longer term thing, where you just sort of look at yourself a bit more, don't you? And I think it's a journey that most of us go through in some phase or another. And you sort of look at yourself and you think about some of the more negative behaviours and things. And so, as I mentioned before, the way my family was, they were all heavy drinkers, and most of them still are. And so the idea of going out on a Saturday night, spending a huge amount of money to drink so much that you can't remember anything about it was normal. I don't drink now. So that's an example. I don't feel the need to. I gave up smoking many years ago. I try to eat healthily if I can. I mean, I love cooking and I love eating, so that's a constant battle, because I love nice food. But essentially, it's just a case of, over time, trying to make better decisions, I think, is the answer to that. Not some kind of instant change overnight sensation kind of thing, but a slow realization that I've got to make better choices for me to then be able to be a better person for somebody else.
Yes, and I suppose in all of that is to love yourself. And in that, I mean, to respect yourself enough to lead a healthy lifestyle, to do the things that you enjoy, and that it's not just about work. That's a difficult, I think, balance for most people, is to allow themselves, all of us, I suppose, to have that care for ourselves. Because unless we care for ourselves, we're not going to be much use for anyone else.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's critical. If you don't like yourself, how can you expect anyone else to?
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
There's definitely elements of that. And I remember having a conversation a number of years ago with a good friend of mine, and we was excuse me, and this we were at a talk where I was presenting a talk on stage, and we hadn't seen each other for a while, but we'd been part of each other's journey, as you do, and you sort of and we'd sort of bumped into each other many times over various years at different events and things, and we following a similar trajectory. And I bumped into him at this talk that I was giving, and he was presenting as well, funnily enough. So there were a few of us on stage during the course of that afternoon. And it was the first time that I had my partner with me. And so I introduced them to one another. And a few minutes later, we got a chance to speak alone. And he was like, my goodness me, she's lovely. She's wonderful. She's a really nice person. Seems great. And I'm like, absolutely. And I said right there and then, and I remember saying it, it's like, this would never have happened a few years ago. Would never have happened, because I wouldn't have been there for I wouldn't have been available for that mentally. So, yeah, it's a really sort of interesting thing to look back on yourself and look at that, because I know categorically that so let's call it 10 years, in the past 10 years, I've worked really, really hard on being a person that isn't the product of my childhood. It's really important to me that where I end up doesn't have to be where I came from,
Yes. Yeah. I was watching something the other day that a friend of mine had composed. She's very much into about people from their childhood and how sort of generational things can affect each generation thereafter.
Yes.
And I then spoke to her and I said to her, do you believe in the sins of the father? I said, oh, yes, I do. She said, because when you think about it, each generation, literally, as the famous song goes by Mike and the Mechanics, and it always resides in my mind, blames the one before. But it takes somebody, for example, in your family like yourself, to break, in effect, those chains of the past, so that the next generation can have a free life, so to speak, even yourself to have a free life and all those that you interact with. So it takes a great deal of strength, and it's something that is admirable that you were able to do that for your family in a way.
Well, yeah, no, again, that's a wonderful example. The song, that great song from Mike and the Mechanics there, and the word blame is absolutely pivotal, isn't it? In the sense, at some point, and again, this is only me speaking personally, but at some point, I had to recognise that I was blaming everybody and everything else, including, my family and my history and things, for things that actually I was to blame for through my actions and the way I interacted with the world. And so actually a lot of the things I needed to blame was actually on myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, very much. But again, it's, I don't know, because I'm not necessarily a sort of, I'm not quite sure what the word is I'm looking for, but I'm not necessarily a believer of things like fate and all that kind of thing. I'm very much a believer in luck favors the prepared mind, as an example. So if you do all the right things for long enough, eventually the world will accommodate. And I do believe that now, because that's been my own personal experience over the past few years with regards to me and my own way of doing things. But again, if we go back to me as a younger man, I would have been all about the whole woe is me, it's everybody else's fault. And I do think that mind shift has been critical in everything.
I think it's a huge shift in anyone's mind to somehow take it away from themselves for a moment, whatever we're facing, and sort of stand outside of ourselves and look down on a situation, because that creates that gap and that space to actually see what is the reality of this situation. Because if we're going to sit there, however terrible things happen in life, ultimately, we're the only ones who can decide whether we want to get out of that situation, and how much effort are we going to put into trying to set ourselves free. And that, in a way, brings that responsibility into our own hands, and the blame game stops.
Yeah, Yes, very much so. I mean, it's for me one of the most powerful tools in all of this has actually been gratitude and practicing that, because there's always something to find to be grateful for, isn't there?
It's true. And I know so many people say to me, I'm sure you hear this, Matt, and they say, I haven't achieved anything in life and it's all rubbish and I feel a failure. And I always say, well, actually, you've got to be a little bit gentle with yourself, because you've got to look at what you've been through and what you've been given in life, sort of the tools of your life. And that's what you have to do, is to look at your own life, because it's a really, really sad and wasteful game to compare to other people's lives, because
Mm.
none of our lives is the same. We've all gone through things that are easy and difficult. So stop playing the game of comparison and actually say, well, I've gone through all of this and here I am. For example, like yourself, you're a world champion. You've written so many books. And for yourself, that is a huge achievement.
Oh, totally, and I agree with you. The measuring yourself against other people is you're doomed to failure. You really are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's just the measurement is where you are in regards to yourself. And again, when people say, I haven't achieved anything, I haven't done anything of note, I've failed at everything, and all the rest of it. Sometimes that is such a false statement, just because of the way that they're framing that within themselves. And I've done this myself. Trust me, when um, like I said before about my father committing suicide and having certain traits and things. I've had very dark times in my younger life, that I don't particularly want to revisit again. But during those times, just getting through the day was a bloody achievement.
Yeah.
Never doing anything incredible, just literally getting through the day and being able to try again the next day. That was the achievement, and that was enough.
Absolutely, that's enough. Especially the world being as crazy as it is, and it's not getting any easier. But just to make it through the day, I always say, keep sane. It doesn't matter what goes on out there. It doesn't matter who's losing the plot or losing their mind. My grandfather always said, you keep sane. Doesn't matter about anyone else.
Mm.
Keep yourself together.
Mm.
Because that is ultimately what will save us, is how are we? How do we keep ourselves in all the madness, in all the craziness, in all the sadness? How is it that we're going to keep ourselves grounded enough to keep strong? And ultimately, I think, to help those people that we love.
Mm. No, I agree. I agree. It's it's that old sort of worry about the things you can change, isn't it? And there's a large amount of truth in that, which is that you can um, but the best thing you can probably do for yourself is to manage the outside world and how that comes into you, isn't it? And if it's really playing on you, if you're finding it challenging, then just don't do it. I mean, this is again something that I stress a lot. I made a conscious decision, I think it was 7 years ago now, where I turned my television off, and I've never watched television since. I watch a movie now and again, so I'm not a complete weirdo, but
I think
but
you're
I
pretty sane, actually.
but I turned my television off completely, and it was one of the best things I ever did. When people say they haven't got time, it turns out that those couple of hours a night in front of the television create quite a lot of time. And so I say to people, yeah, stop, literally turn all that off and go for a nice walk in nature. Look around you, see the beauty of all of that, and let that be the influence of the day.
Oh, for sure. I'm not a TV watcher, I have to say. I do watch sometimes films and things like that, but
Mm.
I'm interested in life, Matt. I'm interested in things that are sort of magic to the world. And the other day, I found this out. I don't know if you know this, but did you know that a butterfly has wings on its, a heart on its wings?
I didn't know that. No.
Well, I was absolutely gobsmacked. And my friend sent me the article and she said, "This is something for you." And, she knows me too well. And there it was, that the butterfly has a heart on its wings. And if you press the butterfly's wings, because of the distress, imagine this, and I sort of liken this to us humans. The more you press it, the color leaves the wings, the patterns start to fade.
Okay.
And I was just totally fascinated. And I thought, well, I'm really glad that I'm interested in hearts on butterfly wings as opposed to just listening to nonsense out there. And it's these small things, isn't it, that make the huge difference of whether you have a good day or a bad day.
Yes, yes. It's where you focus your energy and time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's been a pleasure, really, to have you on the show, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, you're welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too, me too. And I would like to know, firstly, a couple of things. Where can people find out about your work and your books and all the things that you do?
Okay, well, the probably the easiest, you can just sort of Google Matt Stait. It's Matt Stait State, or you can have a look at some of the websites. The main one being www.differentthink.co.uk.
Brilliant. And have you ever met a samurai warrior? I want to ask you.
Great question.
This is a Kung Fu watcher, so, I have to ask you the question.
No, I've never actually met a real samurai, as in, from the official bloodlines and from the actual families like that. Unfortunately, no. I mean, I don't class myself as one at all. It's the name of my gym, which is
yes, I know it is.
which is how I've ended up with that. I don't actually believe I'm some feudal warrior from ancient sort of Japan.
Well, who knows? You never know what the bloodline is, do you?
Yeah. But no, unfortunately, no. I've never actually met a what is an official samurai.
Well, there's still time.
Yes, yeah, I'd love to. I would absolutely love to.
Yeah, there's still time. They're fascinating, aren't they? The whole thing about them, their whole way of life. I mean, I thought when I was young that they were sort of, you could meet them down the road, but clearly not. But that was my sort of imagination of, well, I'm going to meet Mr. Miyagi down the road as well, but that never happened.
Yeah, no, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, but they do have a whether it's true or not, because when you actually look into the history of it, there's good and bad, same as everything else. But they do have a romance attached to them that's quite sort of beguiling.
Oh yes, and I think that's the sort of fairy tale that I would like to keep in my mind, along with the butterfly wings with hearts on them.
Yes, oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That's a nice world to live in, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of sort of attributes that are sort of given to them that are really positive and great to sort of roll yourself upon. I mean, hence is one of the reasons why I named the gym the way that I did.
Yeah, I thought there must have been some sort of deeper reason why you did that, for sure. But before we go, I always ask my guests this, Matt, and that is, in a sort of few lines, for people out there right now in the world, all over the world, what advice would you give them about leading a more fulfilling life, a life that is more hopeful, that's something that's possibly helped you in your life?
Okay, well, there are three things I try and do every day without fail if I can, and maybe that's probably my answer. So very quickly, the first one, as I've already mentioned, is gratitude. I always take time in my morning to have a few minutes just reflecting on all the wonderful things that I have around me and have with me and the people and that sort of thing. The second thing I try to do is learn something new every day. So as an example, today I've learned that butterflies have hearts on their wings, which I didn't know previously. So it's great. I always try and learn something new daily. That's important to me. And then the third and final thing is I try to do, and this is a bit cliched, but I think is highly relevant. I try to do something that my future self will thank me for every day. So that could be something like spending 10 minutes working on my website. It could be writing a blog. It could be making a phone call to an old friend or relative that I haven't caught up with in a little while, just to touch base and maintain the relationship, and so those really are the three things that I try to make sure I do every day. And that's pretty much what I would say to people.
Very wise advice. And even if we start with those three things and we try it, I think it would make a huge difference in our life long term.
I think so. Yeah, it compounds. I mean, especially the doing things that your future self will thank you for. So, that definitely pays dividends further down the line. I'm testament to that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you again, Mad. I wish you all the very best in all your endeavours and all your projects and life. And do come back again sometime and tell us how you are and how you're getting on.
I would love to. That was great. I've thoroughly enjoyed the talk. So thank you very much.
Yeah, me too. And I've learned a lot of things. And I love martial arts especially. So you've sort of reawakened that in me again.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully we'll see you at a club soon.
All right, then. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Mad Stait. What an inspiring story. And really, it shows that if you put your mind to it, anything is possible. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you beautiful moments. And until next time, look after yourselves and lots of love.
Thank you for listening to Secrets for an Inspirational Life, brought to you by your host, Mimi Novic. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and see you in the next episode. For more information about Mimi Novic and her books, music, and inspirational work, take a look at her website, www.miminovic.co.uk.